And now I get to introduce our speaker and spiritual mother, Maureen Muldoon. I have no script for this. This is just everything that I have known so far about her. Not everything, even because there's not enough time. It would be a whole sermon. But Maureen helps bring people's voice and visibility and value to light. And she is a truth teller through her poetry and her storytelling and her songwriting and her fierce love. And I am so grateful to get to introduce her and to once again hear the truths that she's going to get to share through her stories today. And, we can all bring it to Holy Spirit, but she is spirit in motion. So I turn this over to you, Maureen. Thank you for bringing it.
Thank you, Regina. And I just got to give another shout out to our young troubadour this morning, Seamus. What an incredible poet. Those lines, I wanted to write them all down. Halos and horns and all that falls in between. Reminded me an echo of Kathy Richardson's song, Sinners and Saints. And God, isn't it the truth? And I just appreciate the consciousness of Speakeasy that draws to us such incredible talent. And that is something to be grateful for. So I am very grateful. And if I seek and know that and speak that about Seamus, you know that I know that about you. I cannot help but know that about you. You are preordained for your own ministry, be that musician or minister or mystic or however the Holy Spirit is calling you to show up. But what I hope is that you do show up. So this past week, we got to hear some sermons. We sat at the knee of women in the Maiden Voyage program that we have here at Speakeasy, and we listened to these truths, these traumas, tragedies, and triumphs that came from these women as they talked about what made them rise. And we arrived then at this conference, and we witnessed sermons in action, and we got to see gospel in action. And we got to show up as gospel in action, meaning we got to show up for Rev Celeste, one of our incredible teachers here, who was the organizer of this conference this weekend, People of African Descent, New Thought Conference, celebrating the soul of the African people and their impact, their powerful impact on the world, and specifically on the conversation of New Thought, which covers everything from, Ernest Holmes to Emerson to 12-Step to Bill W. to the Fillmores, whose house we're in right now. And honoring our roots is the conversation that we're coming out of, but apparently Spirit wants us to stay in it a little longer. So we got to hear the Gospels of Rev Celeste, of Reverend Micheal Beckwith, who lit us up. Bukeka, who's one of the musicians who has sung for us before in our community, Ester, Nicholson. Really too many for me to share with you, but what I got to know is not just that we heard the Gospels, but we got to witness the Gospels. I'd rather see a sermon than to hear it any day. I'd rather one should walk with me than tell me of the way. The eye is a better pupil, more willing than the ear. Fine counsel is confusing, but examples always clear. And the best of all the preachers are the ones who live their creed. For to see a good put in action is what everybody needs. I can soon learn how to do it if you will show me how it's done. I can watch your hand in action, but your tongue's too fast to run. And the lectures you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lessons from observing what you do. For I may misunderstand you and the high advice you give, but there's no misunderstanding how you act and how you live. That's a poem from Edgar Guest. If you don't know it, check it out. I've only read a portion of it. But the idea is, are you living your sermon? Is your life a demonstration of God's truth? Is your life a manifestation of the glory of God? What is your legacy? Is it trails? Is it trials? Is it traumas? Or is it your expansion of your own talents? Are you digging them up? Are you showing them off? Are your bags heavy, or are your arms strong? Are you showing off how good God has been to you? Are you wearing God's kindness, God's joy, God's brilliance on your sleeve? Do people know that you are a man or woman of love? Are you living your sermons? You don't need to convince me that you are or are you not, because I am already sold on by what I'm not told, but what I have witnessed. Your life speaks louder than your words. My life speaks louder than my words. So this weekend, we were a few of the white people at the conference, and it was built and designed for the celebration of the African people. A few women approached us at different times of the conference, brave, beautiful women who came to us and said, "Can I ask you a question? What are you doing here?" And we told them, we're here to hold space for the healing. We are a part of the healing. We're here to celebrate the contribution of African American people to our legacy. We're here to honor and support our friends. We're here for the same reason you're here. But we don't want to show up like those unhealed Karens. We want to be queens. So we want to lean back and just hold space for you, because you have not been held space for, you have not been adequately honored. We want to be a part of that. Because this is our history. This is not just their history, this is our history. This is not just their legacy, this is our legacy. We're one. Do we say that or don't we say that? So today we're speaking about the legacy of love. Yes, we have individual legacies, but we also have communal legacies. A human species, our human species, our communal legacy has shown us that we can and are capable of doing some wonderful, some beautiful things. And as a human species, our communal legacy has shown us that we are capable of doing some horrific things. And the good and the not so good belong to all of us. It's our legacy. Our potential for love is incredible. Our potential for hate is insatiable. We put a man on the moon, we put kids in cages. We control fire, we invent wheels, we use these same things to burn down villages and run people down. We invented electricity, automobiles, calendars, calculators, compasses, allowing us to see where we are in the world and what we're up for and where we want to go. But sometimes still with all that ingenuity, we feel strangely lost and alone and confused. These feelings are a part of our legacy. That's the legacy of fear. If we don't evolve and intentionally and internally evolve, if we're not willing to look at those harder esoteric questions about humanity and sit in on those conversations, then all of the telescopes, all of the compasses, all the calendars and calculators will never get us closer to the truth. So what does get us closer to the truth seems to be our stories. Our willingness to listen to another version of the story, to come not knowing to the conversation, not trying to push our agenda, what we know, but to come saying, I don't know. It's uncomfortable for me not to know, but I don't know. So let me listen. Because a story has 1,000 windows, and depending on which window you peek through, you will see an entirely different kingdom. And don't you want to see all the kingdoms of God? This is the truth with many of the myths, the Bible stories, the parables of our histories. One such story is the beginning of Exodus. Exodus is the second book of the Bible. Exodus means the road out. And we are currently moving out of an old consciousness and moving into a new consciousness, from the logical into the vortex of love, which is our heart. To let go of all we think we know, to let go and move into that love. Up until this point in the Bible, before Exodus, the people did not come off very well. They were killing and molesting and living from the level of the problem. But Abraham takes his people to the Israelites in Egypt, and they begin to look for a better life. Egypt is the promised land. It's like how Americans might see our Mexican immigrants. So this tribe comes to Egypt. They want a new beginning. They want a new life. They want a way out of this old life, of this old consciousness. They want to work hard. They want to make a better life for their children. But there's this new king in power who has taken the throne in Egypt. He did not like the Israelites. He said to his people, these Israelites, they're dangerous because, there's so many of them. We need to kill them, because what does that mean? That is the principle of scarcity. The principle of scarcity is the vortex of hell every time. So in the story, we get to see this principle of scarcity represented by this king. And he says, well, let's just work him to death. We'll give him menial jobs and we'll make him do the hard stuff. Hopefully that'll kill him off. But the Israelites, like the African Americans, like the Mexican Americans who have shown up, they should have been annihilated by the way that we have treated them in our country, and yet they just grew stronger. And this really upset the king in this story. So he calls the midwife. He says, let's get him at the entrance. He tells the midwives, when you deliver an Israelite baby, take that baby and throw him in the river. The boy, he says, just the boy babies. And you might think, why just the boy babies? Because the king didn't think much of girls. That's still something we need to heal. And the girl babies weren't even worth killing in the mind of the king. So now there's these two midwives, Shipron and Pora, and they are at a crossroads, right? Because the king, their leader, their power is ordering them to kill these boy babies, but they're midwives. Like we are each midwives for each other. And they have no doubt been called to their career, their calling earnestly and honestly. They have committed to be the ones who drew life out. You too are these midwives. You are committed to drawing life out. How can we go against the grain of our being to do the exact opposite, to snuff life out? How are we supposed to do that? So they are in between a rock and a hard place, as we sometimes feel like we're in between a rock and a hard place. They stuck to their covenant, though, these noble midwives, their truth, their own internal compasses. And when the king found out that they were not killing boy babies, he calls to them and he says, why are you not killing the boy babies? I know this sounds like a Borat movie, but this is the Bible. And, he says, like, I give you a simple job, you knucklehead, you can't even throw a few babies in the river. Like, what's wrong with you? And so the Pharaoh was afraid, though. He came from this place of fear that these strong people would infiltrate his people. And he didn't want to mix. He wanted to keep things separate. Isn't that also a vortex of hell? To controlling, to try and keep things separate. So God loves to mix her paints, and she always has. And we see this in Genesis, even with the Tower of Babel, when the people are trying to build basically what was an ancient sort of Aryan nation. Basically, this tower was built for people who spoke the same way, who thought the same way, so they could have their own temple to God. And God comes down and scatters them all and gives them all different languages. And, this is why it's called the Tower of Babel, because then nobody could understand each other. And now God was not messing with this people. It's just that she doesn't like separation, and she likes to mix and mingle her creations, and she loves to put cream in her coffee and chocolate in her milk. Who doesn't? So plus she wants to help us grow, Sure, you can love the ones you know. That's easy. But can you love the stranger, the ones you don't know, the ones you do not understand? Think of the person right now that you don't understand. Now, understand is not a prerequisite for love. That's right where you want to continue to sit closer to the interpretation of the Holy Spirit to assist you in recognizing that there's something for you to grow there. So it's not easy to grow. We want to defend. We want to, stay safe. In the early 1960s, when we began to integrate our schools, there was so much resistance against this integration that there was actually a school in Farmville, Virginia, where my older sister went to college, where they decided to close their public schools instead of integrate them. Can you imagine that? At the same time, the 6-year-old girl, Ruby Bridges, was walking into a school, the doors of William Fretz Elementary School in New Orleans in Louisiana, and she became the first African-American child to step into an all-white school. This child was walking on the moon. This child was walking on water. This child was walking us to a place of a greater awareness. This child was one of the best sermons you could ever lay your eyes on. She was being spit at and shouted down, but she was called to play her part so that we might have a better chance of walking each other home. She's our roots. She and her family set a precedent for what courage would look like. How brave of a mother to trust the world with her most prized possession, her child. Like the Blessed Mother trusted us with her child. Like African-American mothers trust us with their children. The world does not prove itself trustworthy. But maybe it's not us that the mothers are trusting. And maybe it's not us that the mothers should trust. Maybe they should turn as Ruby Bridges' mother turned every day when she put her out into the world in the care of these authorities that were taking her to that school. What she did until that child returned to her was pray. That's what she trusted. She trusted God, and God ended up being quite trustworthy in regards to this story. So legions upon legions will receive these gifts that you receive when you are healed. This is what the Course in Miracles tells us. Healed from what? What are we looking to heal from? We're looking to heal from separation. It says all sickness is separation. And how do we separate ourselves? Like the pharaohs, we try through all means possible to separate ourselves from the other guy, to kill him off. Segregation, castration, annihilation, amputation, everyday judgments, Everyday judgments will keep us separate from each other. So we begin to build these walls, consciously and unconsciously. So back to the king, the pharaoh. He sees the midwives are not killing the babies, and he says, why are you not killing the babies? And the midwives tell the pharaoh, geez, these Israelite ladies, they are so lively that they birth these babies before we even get to them. They created this story, this new story, about these women so that they could assist in keeping life fluid. And because these noble midwives acted on behalf of life, they were one of the first times in the Bible that we see that women are given families. Before this point in Genesis, we see that, Joe begot John, and John begot Ralph, and Ralph begot Frank, and Frank begot, and so on and so on and so on down the male lineage. But when these two midwives stand up for their truth, in the Bible, it says God gave them families. They begot families. Well, of course they begot families. Every single child that they saved from fear, nations were built from these children. So it's interesting to note that. At this very same time, a young mother, a descendant of Levi, who is a descendant of Jacob and a descendant of Abraham, which is kind of important because this is the lineage of Jesus Christ, gives birth to an Israelite baby, and he is so beautiful. He is so beautiful that the mother is fearing for his life, so she hides him for 3 months. Have you ever felt so protective over something so beautiful? Maybe right now you have a gift that is causing you to be in awe. It's such a great thing of beauty that you think, I better hide this from the world. So she's brave. She's a part of your legacy. And she tells us what to do. Keep it safe in the beginning stages, but you got to bring it out. So after she can no longer hide the baby, the mother builds a boat out of reeds and tars, and she places the child in the basket, and she sets the baby adrift on the Nile River, the same river that everyone is supposed to drown the Hebrew babies in. Can you imagine? She places her child at the border and sending them across unfriendly waters. Can you imagine having no option but to trust God and the waters to carry your child to safe harbors? The story is ancient. The story is current. So to give your child away so that they might have a better life is not so easy. So she must have been resting on the strength of her ancestors, their legacy. She must have been living off the legacy of Abraham, who took his son to the altar to sacrifice his son, if you remember that story. She may have even heard that story of Abraham and how he followed God's directions, and once at the altar, God showed him mercy, like Ruby's mother. She must have been praying as she placed that baby in the basket. God, show this child mercy. And she places that baby in the Nile River, and the baby's older sister, who's not in danger of being murdered, of course, because she has a vagina. She's not worth anything. Follows the baby down the river, and she sees the Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, sees the baby coming down the river, and she watches the baby. And she sees the baby. Now, if the princess is going to obey her father, she must press that baby to the water. After all, she's the king's daughter, and the king has declared that all Hebrew babies must be tossed in the river. So we hold our breath at this point of the story, and we see, what will she do? And what she does is stunning. She draws the baby out of the water. She says, this must be a Hebrew baby. The sister watches on. She sees the princess has shown mercy on the baby, and she dares to run up to the princess, and she says, do you want me to find a Hebrew mother to nurse that baby? The princess says yes. So the sister runs home to get her mother and brings her to the princess, and the princess places the baby back in her mother's arms. This story demonstrates to us, once again, what it demonstrated to us, what Abraham experienced. Place everything on the altar. Trust God. Your good will be returned to you intact, unviolated. So the princess tells her mother, take the child. The princess tells this mother, take this child. She gives the mother back her child. And not only that, but she says, I will pay you to nurse this child. Now the mother is getting paid to nurse her own baby, getting paid to be a mother. We haven't even figured this out in our current society, how to support mothers in this way. How radical. How come that idea hasn't caught on? So later on, when he's older, the mother brings the child back to the princess, and the princess raises him to be her son, and the princess names his child Moses, which means to draw out. And because he was drawn out of the water. Now these midwives and this Pharaoh's daughter and this child and Ruby and her mother, they didn't listen to the law. They listened to the love. They made a covenant with love, and they let it lead them. And it was not easy. And they tossed the news and the telescopes and the calendars and the calculators and the compasses, and they trusted instead their heart. Because if they had looked through the telescope, if they had checked the news, the calendar, or the compass, they would have seen that this is not a good time for faith. But when it comes to fear, it's never a good time for faith. And it feels like an ending, and it's actually a beginning, and it's a great beginning indeed. It's a wonderful sermon to see a mother and a daughter and these midwives and all these people show us what love would have us do. So while I was at the conference, I got to see my first minister. Now, I grew up with many priests and many nuns, but I had never had a minister before this man. A minister, one who administers medicinal counseling. His name is Reverend Micheal Beckwith, Dr. Reverend Micheal Beckwith. And he changed the trajectory of my life. When I was first dating my husband, when I was first dating him, I had come off of a bad relationship where my first husband left me for another woman. Won't go too far into that. You already know the story. And I was sitting in church with my boyfriend. I wanted him to know who I was. I wanted to bring him to my God. I wanted to bring him to my Catholic roots. I wanted to show him who I believed in. This was important to me. And in between us sat my son. And we ended up in this church, of course, on this day that was national celebration of weddings, of marriages. And Will and I sat there as they began to give a sermon about how important it is to be married in the Catholic Church. And the priest said, all married couples, please stand up. And we didn't because we weren't. And I felt oddly uncomfortable as I looked around at all of the beautiful couples, and I felt shame because I felt people were looking at me and my boyfriend and thinking, they have a child between them, what's up? Let's get her a red letter. And then the priest went on to say, marriage is this and marriage is that. And he went on to say a few other things. And I felt this thing crawling up inside of me that felt so unholy. And then I heard the priest say, if you marry a divorced woman, you make of her a harlot. And then my sadness spilled over me. And I began to weep. And I began to cry. Because I couldn't believe that I sat in a church of God with my son beside me and have a minister explain that I was a whore in the eyes of this church because I was divorced. And Will didn't know what to do. He just sat there dumbfounded. He patted me on the shoulder. And I just kept crying. And I cried because I knew at this moment I could not stay in this church. It was the beginning of my own exodus. I had to leave. I had to find another place. These shoes were giving me blisters. I couldn't stay here. And I didn't want to leave. You have probably found yourself in that situation as well. We just try and stay there on the threshold and say, I can make it work, I can make it work, I can make it work. And we don't know. We are in an abusive relationship. And God wants us to grow. And God wants us to go. And it's not comfortable, and it's not easy, and it's not a light switch. It's an evolution. It's an emerging into this new life. And we're going to cross some deserts. And my husband, who was not my husband at the time, Will, he said to me, I'm going to take you someplace that I think you're going to like. I didn't even know this Egypt existed. I didn't know this promised land was available to me. He took me to agape. I couldn't believe when I sat down in this church and I heard Reverend Beckwith speak. I couldn't believe the elixir that was filling pores in me that I didn't know were empty. I didn't know were thirsty. I began my journey. This was what was my annihilation, was actually my evolution. This was what looked like an inhale, was actually an extension, an expansion. And evolution is not a straight line. You know, it's like breath. There's an inhale, there's an exhale, there's an ebb, there's a flow, there's 2 steps forward, there's 1 step backwards. And we can get hung up on the idea that it looks like we're moving backwards again, but we're not. Looks like we're being shut down again, but we're not. This is the way things grow organically. All of your endings are new beginnings, elaborately disguised. So we must strive to always stay on the course, move forward. This is not just for yourself. Of course, it's because you are healed. You are not healed alone, like Ruby Bridge, like every single person who has ever been brave enough to take a step forward and listen to their hearts. So you're here. You're listening to this sermon that was birthed from all of those sermons. You're in this community of noble midwives holding space for extravagant consciousness. You have arrived here not by luck, but by lineage that is drawing you into itself. And we are not lucky, we are responsible. We're responsible for the extension of this consciousness. So I implore you, if you hear these words, to sit closer, to speak up, to play your part. Even if your knees are weak, even if you're feeling like you don't have it, engage and risk being awkward, and risk being awakened, and risk being activated in your own legacy. Because when we're healed, we're not healed alone. Again, legions of legions will receive the gifts that you receive when you are healed. And healing is the recognition that you belong to me and I belong to you, that I am one with you, that we are that fearless child heading off to school, that we are those U.S. diplomats that are escorting the child with her, that we are the mother who stays home and prays, that we are the king in fear of losing power, that we are the noble midwives, that we are the sisters looking after our brothers as he drifts down the Nile, that we are the men and women who came to this conference, that we are the officers who are swinging the batons and causing other bridges to turn ruby with blood. You know what? Bloody Sunday. That we are those men and women walking in peace. All of these lives, all of us, they're all of our legacy. And we get to decide. Each of us gets to decide. Do we take down the enemy and think of ways to beat him down? Or do we take the enemy in and raise him as our own, as that princess did? When you look at the story, as you look into your hearts, depending on what window you peer through, you can see 1,000 different versions, but really it comes down to love or fear. Love extends, fear amputates. I do not need to pray to God for mercy on me or you, because God is always merciful. I need to pray that you will have mercy on me and pardon me as I pass by, even if I'm awkward and even if I trespass. And that I will have mercy on you and pardon you as you pass by, even if you trespass. In the end, we are each, in every moment, moving through mercy or massacre. That's our legacy. You get to decide, heaven or hell, and that's the word.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you, Maureen. And we will get to the conversation shortly, but first let's hear another song from Seamus Scanlon.
That was really beautiful, and I'll admit I'm a little bit emotional, so if I trip up over the song, I hope you'll just bear with that. Please, I need some help here. just need to know where I belong. My number's getting higher, my bank can't get much lighter, my throat is getting tighter, and my knees hurt. My hands are always shaking, my body's always aching. When I wake, I get so angry about things. How much life must I miss here before the road gets clear? And my mind starts to wander about me. Oh, won't you please give me a chance? All I want is just to try. Take you by the hand, look you in the eye, say I'm sorry that you have been failed, I'm sorry that nothing feels right. I see that your gloves are all tattered, there's nothing left inside. And I admit that I don't know what to do, but oh, how I see you. Please, I need some help here. Just need to know where I belong. Thank you.
Thank you again for just another beautiful, supportive, gentle song to bring us into our conversation.
Oh, wow.
No, there's been so much wow.
We love that, Seamus. What a great minister he already is. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'll pass back to you.
Well, there was just so much in your sermon, and some themes that I heard were courage and mother and faith, and these places where we are, learning that the truths that we once believed in are no longer our truths, because the truth of God is really speaking to us, and that we get to be led into something else where love is really present. And there was so much of that in your sermon today. I honestly don't know where to begin except by presencing that. And also just inviting our community to perhaps share an experience where that is occurring in your life, and the prickliness of it, and then the newness of stepping into something that is unfamiliar, but yet is starting to feel so right when we step into our truth. And Sinead, yes, please take us into the announcements and giving. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sinead Ryan, and I'm a grateful member of Speakeasy. Speakeasy is a virtual spiritual community with a full calendar of events to support your spiritual journeys all week long. Our events are Sunday and Thursday night, sacred sanctuary prayer and meditation at 8:18 p.m. Central Time. Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time is the Death Cafe. And many salons are meeting this week, including dating, technology, frequency, and parenting salons. There is a link to our calendar events in the chat or at the speakeasyspiritualcommunity.com. There you will find all the Zoom details, times, registrations for each of these events, and many more. Speakeasy is a non-profit community existing solely on the generosity of our community members. Thank you for playing your part and for taking the opportunity to make a donation today. Your generous donations help us bring spiritual leaders, artists, and speakers to Sunday service and keep our vital conversations and experiences thriving. And so today I invite you to turn within and see what is yours to share. The donation link is in the chat as well as on our website, speakeasyspiritualcommunity.com. Thank you for your generous support.
Thank you, Sinead. Sinead is one of our Course in Miracles teachers in Miracles Live 365, and she's as beautiful on the inside as she is on the outside. Go figure. Yeah, so now we have a conversation.
Yeah, I could go into what I'll invite you in. So now it's time for the truly unique experience of Speakeasy Sunday service, our community conversation. This is where we invite you to speak easily, find your truth and your voice, share your thoughts, inspirations, awarenesses, and your questions. When you feel called to share a question or comment, please raise your virtual hand, which is located in the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen. Please also note to leave your video on when doing so we can see you. And so the conversation is now open, and I kind of presence that before the announcements as far as the things that I really heard to be clear messages in Maureen's sermon today. And I just want to invite anybody who is being called to share here today.
Oh, thank you, Maureen. That was just amazing. And just so what I needed to hear, in so many ways. And, recently, as you know, and some of the community would know, my husband was laid off work. And what you wouldn't know, I suppose I've only shared maybe with you, Regina, is that recently in my own teaching, just the groups and the things that I run, there's something that has felt a little bit icky and a little bit off and a little bit stale and a little bit old and just sort of off track. And I was feeling quite disillusioned, and I took all of this to, my God of my understanding. And what I'm being told, or what I'm being given, is that, this new consciousness is here. It's on the horizon, and it needs everything new. The old just does not work. We can't get to a new place from that old consciousness. And for me, it's like everything has to shift and change. And I'm being now kind of guided a little bit. I've stopped everything, and guidance is coming in, and it scares the bejesus actually. As in, it's like my kids are my greatest teachers, and they want a whole new language. They don't want, and dare I say it, A Course in Miracles where all the pronouns are he. They don't even want the word God, but they want the Course in Miracles. They're hungry. They're hungry for change. They're hungry for something new. They're hungry for love. They're, hungry to know it all. And they want it all. They're like, we're saying yes, but please bring it to me in a way that I can understand it. And so they're my teachers, and they're the ones that are guiding me to, I think, what I'm going to do next. And I'm not even sure that I'm going to do it. I'm waiting for that full-bodied yes, that this is what I'm to do next. But it's that place, Maureen, where you have to, it's like when you get to the crowning part of birth, you want to put that baby back in because it's so fucking painful. And you're literally saying, you know what, I give up. I'm not going to have the baby. It can just stay there. You know, you're at that last minute of birth, but you can't. You got to move through. You got to move on through, and you've got to birth the new, and you've got to bring that baby in, whatever it may be. And we all have babies, and they mightn't be physical babies in our wombs, but we've all got babies. You know, we've all got things to birth during our time here. And, you know, if I'm correct, that's part of what you were saying this morning. But sometimes we need to hear it. We need to hear love speak through someone else to, you know, to drum it in, to drill it in, or so we can get that full bodied yes and go, okay, I'm going to do it. It scares the shit out of me, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yes. The old consciousness is actually pushed by pain, labor pain. You know, and so like we have allowed ourselves to be taught through pain, and now we're being pulled by vision, and vision is almost scarier than pain. And there's many of us who have had the experience where we have faced pain and really allowed ourselves to get totally still with it and recognize that it's nothing. So that gig is getting put to rest anyhow, number one. And number two is this is the exact demonstration of the idea that how good is our God. Like, are you allowed to bring heaven to earth without sacrifice? That is that which we're stepping into. And it's not for us to think about it, it's for us to bring about it and be about it. And that's the scariest thing, is just to be about it without our logic or lineal, how is this going to work out for me? So it's always in this very reciprocal state of listening, the feminine, listening. And God will draw you back, and love will fling you forward. And you will think, I will be awkward, but you will be divine.
Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like what you're saying, Maureen, has been present so much this weekend through the leaders of African descent at this New Thought conference, is the faith that they have just shared with us in how they have stepped forward into their roles. The minister last night was talking about how it took her 8 years to answer the call, but she knew it was there. And she really stepped into it. And it's just, you know, it's been kind of awe-inspiring to be immersed in this energy this weekend. So
yeah, and in regards to the vocabulary and the vernacular, it doesn't matter. Do not throw out any of your vocabulary or vernacular. If you learned French, you're going to still be using French. If you're called to learn Japanese, you're going to learn Japanese. You're not going to abort one for the other. So your children might say, don't tell us about God, and you're going to talk to them about love, but there might be other people in the corners that are saying, tell us about God. So don't worry about trying to figure it out. Just let yourself entertain all that you are. All that you are. Yes, you can be that teacher that speaks of only love. Yes, you can be that teacher that lives in the ancient gospels. Why not? Why not have all of that in your medicine bag? And why not make apology for it? If you can't handle the truth because I'm using words that frighten you, fuck you. Rise to my consciousness. I'm not going to steep to your consciousness. You better rise to my consciousness, because I'm no longer bowing to be what you need me to be. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? That's the church. She lives within us, and she doesn't prostrate herself. She allows her truth to come in whatever form, flavor, or fashion needs to be expressed at that time. You don't have to figure it out, because if you did try and figure it out, you would start to segregate yourself and come fractured to all occasions and start to walk on eggshells trying to please everybody and their sister and brother and daughter and son. That's not you. That's not me. That's not us. That's all.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here. Good to be with you. Wonderful to hear you speak, Maureen. And I know that I've heard this message and story various times at deeper levels. And isn't that true how life is? And that there's certain death to parts of ourselves as we come to opening up to the real parts of ourselves. And that suffering actually leads to us opening up to our purpose if we allow ourselves to be in those uncomfortable places, that we can truly open up to what the gift is that wants to come through us. And so I wish to invite people to Tuesday evenings, Death Cafe, because we can actually talk about death of a part of ourselves that opened us up to something new. It's not just death of someone that we know or our own death of leaving this body. It's various bodies that we carry in some sense. So I wanted to presence that. And sitting in front of me from a yoga nidra class that I'm leading tonight, I was going to end with this poem, and it's sitting right here, and I thought, well, gee, it's here for a reason, and it's Allow by Donna Folds. There is no controlling life. Try corralling a lightning bolt, containing a tornado, dam a stream and it will create a new channel. Resist and the tide will sweep you off your feet. Allow and grace will carry you to higher ground. The only safety lies in letting it all in, the wild and the weak, fear, fantasies, failures, and success. When loss rips the doors off your heart or sadness veils your vision with despair, practice becomes simply bearing the truth. In the choice to let go of your known way of being, the whole world is revealed to your new eyes.
Oh, Lord, that is just on point. If you don't know Kate Miller, she's a practitioner from the Bodhi Spiritual Center. She and I got to work together there, and she is the curator of this conversation that happens under the title Death Cafe. And I love what you had to share, Kate, about things dying. And here's the thing, we are in the constant state of death. We are in the constant state of life. You know, we are in the constant state of death, we're in the constant state of life, and that's okay. Like, that actually is helpful for us to know and to dance with what that looks like. And also in different varying degrees. Sometimes you might feel like you have so much life with a little sprinkle of death. And sometimes you might feel I have all death and just a little sprinkle of life. And it ebbs and flows. And it ebbs and flows. So any given time you can show up to that conversation and, you know, hold space for others, but also prepare a way for when comes the day that your mom or dad should die and you will know people and people will know you in that conversation. That's a thing to invest in. Courageous conversations around death. That's a thing to show up for before your feet are on fire and before the world rips the doors off your heart. So you can prepare yourself for an elegant arrival. This is something that people are not going to tell you to do. But I would say go to that conversation. I would say go to the Culture Club conversations. These are the conversations that are going to assist you in opening up doors to the corridors of kingdoms that live within you. These conversations are the vortexes to kingdoms that live within you that you get to entertain, so you don't show up shallow and one-faceted. These are all available, you know, so anyway, that's what I'd say about that. Thank you so much for hosting that conversation. And maybe it's not location specific. Maybe it is the internal idea of yourself that's being projected out in a faceted of ways, you know, and you are not alone. And, you know, just that comes to my mind is that the other courageous conversations we host at Speakeasy are 12-step. You know, this is an Al-Anon situation if I ever heard one. You know, so and the ego will say, well, I don't have time for that meeting. I want to go to Egypt instead. I want to fly off to a retreat that's like, take care of the roots of your being and get to those deep wells that are available and within reach, and I would say get to an Al-Anon meeting, and not just one. Like, go to one every day until you allow that elixir to wash over you and raise you into a vibration that's actually able to navigate this without sacrifice. And it has been done, and it has been done. 1,000 million people have walked this course before you, and you do not have to suffer alone. You're not alone, and you don't have to suffer alone. So I sit in that classroom, and I don't need it today, but I show up because it helps me to maintain it for others. And it's being maintained for you to show up. And that's what I say about that. So, feels like it was all about courageous conversations, right? Feels like there's so many places that we are able to find elixir and deep water, because these things that death and addiction, and differences, they are the thing that keep us disenfranchised and separate. And yet there are ministers who have gone before us, like I said, like Bill W., like Martin Luther King, like these conversations that we host at Speakeasy, like they land on the shoulders of our legacy, a legacy of love. And we'd be a fool not to tap into them. They're free.
Yeah, I've been to several of them, and I know our 12 Step to Miracles is amazing. I know that it helped to propel me into joining CODA and just immersing myself in that, and just it wakes us up to who we are and the places where we're victimizing ourselves, and shows us how we can help ourselves, and it also helps others so much.
Yeah, and the common denominator is that we're sitting knee to knee and eye to eye. There is no teacher. We're all teachers. More than being teachers, more holy word than teacher is friend.
Mm-hmm.
We're being friendly to each other. We're holding space for each other. And that's what happens in those meetings. Kate Miller is an expert in this field of death doula, but she doesn't show up like that. She shows up like a friend. Gigi is a master teacher of Course in Miracles. Mia is a master teacher for the Course in Miracles. Siobhan is a master teacher of Course in Miracles. Sinead, I'm sorry, I said Siobhan. They don't show up like a teacher. They show up like a friend. That's what the new consciousness is asking us to be. And a friend can pray and be with you in any single language and in every single language. We are dismantling the Tower of Babel, and we're moving into this fluid language of love that can be heard and interpreted in every language. And I'm grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, this whole community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what the Holy Spirit told me to say this morning, which I don't want to say, I'm going to say it anyhow, is do not underestimate the size of our community, because the consciousness is immeasurable. So do not underestimate the size even of a 12-step meeting. Do not underestimate the size of things, because we are using the logical brain instead of the measurement of God's ability.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'm hearing is to let your guard down and step into these places that you don't think that you need. You will learn so much from these people who have already stepped into it and are willing to look. It is miraculous. It really is. So even if you don't think you need it, get curious. Listen to the call and just go, even if it makes no sense.
Yeah.
That will reveal why you're there when you're there. but
Yeah.
we just need to answer the call first.
I think these are our modern day mystic schools, and they come in thimbles, of little meeting here and meeting there. But the Holy Spirit has the curriculum, and you are being groomed. What we heard this weekend was that in A Course in Miracles, we're told that we're ministers of God. And this minister spoke to us last night. It struck a chord in every cell of my body because I know that this is true. And she was speaking the words that I know to be true, which is we're moving from minister, which uses the word, to mystic, which uses, the minister uses the word and the law, and mystic uses the wordless. And if the mystic does speak, it's poetic truth, like our troubadour demonstrated to us today, Seamus. That's the mystic. We're moving into the mystic. That's exciting. That's exciting for us to move into that. And I'm ready. I'm ready. And we go nowhere alone. So we all move together. All the consciousness, we all move together. You are that poet. You are Rumi. You are Buddha. You are Christ. You are Christ. This is heaven. And that's the step that we make into mystic, to say, I'm uncomfortable with that, but I'm going to get comfortable with that. Yeah. So, did you want to share anything else before we get to hear another song?
Yeah, one more thing comes to mind, and I hope I can get this out of my mouth. I mentioned earlier that we did this exercise of naming the parts of the flower for us. So the roots, the learning, the thorn, and then the actual flower. And something that I learned this weekend is that how we can say no more to the judgment, like allow the judgment to be healed. And I'll give you the example. I was feeling fear because my partner, my boyfriend, and his children are going to my house today to move the rest of his stuff out because we're breaking up. And I fear their judgment of what they're thinking of me because I made this choice. And then being here this weekend, I have heard people who have lived in the space of judgment of whatever white people are thinking about them and have made up these horrible, fucking awful stories and treated them terribly. And then I got to witness how they have risen and are now teaching new thought. And their faith in God is immense. It has moved me so deeply this weekend. I'm still processing all of it. And then to look at my story of fear about how Will and his children might be viewing me does not matter, because I'm moving into truth and I'm moving more deeply into my faith in God, that none of that matters anymore. And it feels so powerful and it feels really loving because I get to be an extension of God in my fullest place when I let go of my fear of what somebody might think of me. And that is it. That's just what was coming through to share for this. So thank you for being part of the conversation.
Yeah, this last song is called Holy Friend. I was going to play it anyway because it's one of my favorite songs I've written, but especially with some of the shares that y'all have said, I feel like it's pretty appropriate. So. I've been meaning to ask you about my holy friend, the one you saw over my shoulder when we got near the end. I haven't felt them in a long time. I sure could use them now. I was thinking I might ask you to send them here somehow, 'cause it sure has been a hard time as I muddle through the plot My shoes are heavy and I don't know the cost. Sure has been a hard time, especially today. And how I miss the words my holy friend would say. It's a short one, but there it is.
Woo. So much.
Mari's a short one, but that doesn't mean you can measure her by her height. She's a powerhouse like your song. First, I'm talking about your height. I love her. She is a funny person to be on a weekend with, I'll tell you that much. Thank you, everybody, for showing up.